Everyone said the golden was too attached to the newborn. They said it wasn't healthy. What the neonatologist told them 2 weeks later reframed every single thing they thought they had seen. Isla was 4 days old and weighed 6 pounds, 3 ounces, and Gus had not left the room since they brought her home. Not for food. He had to be carried to his bowl twice on the first day. Not for the yard. He stood at the back door, looked out, looked at the bassinet, and came back. Not for any of the routines that had structured his 5 years in that house. The morning walk, the evening fetch, the nightly position at the foot of the bed. All of it set aside. Gus lay outside the bassinet with his chin on his front paws and his nose tilted slightly upward, and he watched Isla breathe. Fiona Marchetti thought it was endearing. Her husband, Seth, thought it was something else. He mentioned it to his mother, who had raised 4 children. She said some dogs just form intense bonds with infants. She said it was instinct. She said not to disrupt it. She also, with the confidence of someone who had raised 4 children, said that this level of fixation in a large dog around a newborn was the kind of thing you monitored carefully. Seth's mother had a way of saying reassuring things that contained warnings. On day 6, Fiona noticed Gus's behavior at night. He was not sleeping. She had assumed he was sleeping because he was lying still, because his eyes had been closed when she checked at midnight. But when she woke at 2:47 a.m. for Isla's feed, Gus was sitting upright beside the bassinet with his nose tilted toward Isla's face and his eyes open and tracking. He looked at Fiona once and looked back at the baby. She mentioned it to the visiting nurse who came on day 7. The nurse said, "How often is he doing this?" Fiona wasn't sure, more than she'd realized. The nurse watched him for 10 minutes during her visit. She did not say anything alarming. She said gently that if the dog showed any change in behavior, more agitation, any vocalization, any increase in intensity, to call right away. 2 days later, at 4:18 a.m., Gus vocalized, a single, sustained, soft sound, not quite a bark, not quite a whine. The sound of an animal who has decided that the time for subtlety is over. Fiona was in the room before she finished waking. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Isla was in the bassinet, breathing. Not breathing, breathing. But the quality of the breathing was wrong. Fiona heard it the moment she was fully in the room. Rapid, shallow, slightly effortful. The breathing of a newborn working harder than newborns should have to work. She picked Isla up and dialed the pediatric emergency line. The nurse on the line asked her to describe the breathing and told her to come in immediately. In the emergency room, Dr. Kenna Osei, neonatologist, examined Isla within 4 minutes of arrival. Isla had respiratory syncytial virus, RSV. In a 4-day-old, the infection had been building silently, her breathing gradually compensating. The change slow enough that a monitor trained on heart rate and oxygen saturation had not yet alarmed. The change in breath quality had been subtle. A parent would have needed to be listening specifically for it at the right moment. Dr. Osei said, "In newborns this age, RSV can progress very fast. The window for early intervention is narrow. You caught this at the right moment." She looked at Fiona. "What made you check?" Fiona said, "The dog." Dr. Osei nodded, as if this were not the first time she had received this answer. "Has your dog ever done something that made no sense, until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard." Dogs detect changes in respiratory pattern through both olfactory and auditory cues. Dr. Osei explained later. When Isla had been stabilized and they were in the family consultation room, breath chemistry changes when the respiratory system is under viral load. The change is detectable before the change in breathing pattern becomes audible to a human in another room, a dog lying close to an infant. That close, that consistently, is running a continuous respiratory assessment. Gus hadn't been too attached. Gus had been doing a job, the kind of job that requires proximity, consistency, and not leaving the room for food, or walks, or the routines of 5 years, because what you are monitoring cannot be monitored from anywhere else. Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Isla came home at 12 days old, healthy, gaining weight, breathing without effort. Gus was in the room when Seth carried her through the front door. He stood up from where he had been lying and walked over and pressed his nose briefly to the baby's blanket. 1 breath, 2, and then he turned and lay back down in his position and put his chin on his paws. He exhaled. Fiona sat on the floor beside him and put her hand on his back. Neither of them moved for a while. Seth took the first walk they'd had in 12 days and came back to find them exactly like that. He stood in the doorway for a moment. He didn't say anything. There wasn't anything that needed saying. Next, a dog that started sitting at the back of a toddler's room every evening at exactly the same time. What was coming through the vent had been building for 6 weeks, and the dog had been marking it from the first night.